Do a little bit of winter identification here. Right here we have a black cherry next to a sassafras. The sassafras trees, I'm not even sure how people identify them. I grew up next to them. I can often pick them out from 25 yards away and not tell you what I'm even seeing that makes them different. So there's almost like a texture. You can see the way the branches are kind of twisted and tangly. In the upper part of the trunks even, they tend to have little waves. There's one a little bit farther out there that's got that branch hanging out over the trail. You can kind of see that about halfway up it starts getting that sort of twistiness to it. There's also the bark here. And the bark's quite distinct in the way that it kind of splits. There's other trees kind of similar, but just the overall combination of the bark and the the growth form seems to make it stand out. The one next to it here, try to get a little closer here. Zoom out a little bit. Get a little closer here. I'm killing myself. But the cherry, it grows smooth bark whenever it's young that has these lenticles going across, almost like a birch. And the bark kind of splits and you can still see these pieces. The only thing really close to this would be a cherry birch. All your other birches are much lighter in color. And also a telltale sign is these things tend to have lots of dead branches and are often infested with carpenter ants. Which is probably why we don't make millions of dollars on lumber around here, because black cherries are a dime a dozen around here, but one that's significant size without being at least partially hollowed out with ants is kind of rare. Trying to see, I can't really see any of the smaller branches on the sassafras, but they usually have like a smooth sort of reddish bark on them. See what else is easy to ID over here. Whoop! Down the trail there's an ash or a beech tree. They tend to hold their leaves and they've got smooth gray bark. Ugh. And another easy one is over there. See if I can zoom in on him. I don't feel like walking down there. But you got the shagbark hickory down there. You can tell because the bark is shaggy. That's kind of distinctive and easy to tell. Zoom out a little bit. Zoom out all the way. Yeah, he's got a little bit of height to him. He gets kind of tall. The cherries can get tall. There's a fairly tall cherry there. And like I said, I can pick some of these trees out from a distance better than others just because I grew up with them and they're way familiar to me. There was another, where the hell did it go? There was another shagbark up there. I'll walk down here a little bit and take a closer look at the beech. These are kind of moving in from squirrels from somewhere else. Usually you see beech close to each other. Oh, there's one of the shagbarks over there. But as I said, they keep their leaves so they're easy to identify in winter. And it's kind of damp, so it looks a little darker, but you can see the gray bark. And even as a big tree, they've got smooth gray bark. And people like to carve initials in them because of that. Don't see too much else that's that easy. We got some oaks. The The maples and the ash tend to have smooth grayish bark when they're young, but then it splits up when they're older. I see a couple of younger maples around here, and most of the ash got the ash borers in this area, so don't really find too many. And here's another sign that that's a hickory tree. You can see the bark there, and when you look on the ground, you can see the husks of a gazillion nuts all over the place. Oh well, moving on. Here's an ash tree. Easy to tell from a distance because you can kind of get the idea what it looked like when it was alive. But these little holes right here, that's the telltale sign of the ash borer. Bark's starting to come loose because the borers eat the cambium layer underneath. Seen some of these falling over, and you'll see all these, it almost looks like somebody carved designs on the exterior of the wood after the bark falls off, because where they went and just mowed through that cambium layer. And of course, this is good for wintertime identification, is stems that are hairy creeping up trees tend to be poison ivy. Might be Virginia creeper, but better safe than sorry. Another tree, this is a white oak. See the bark. Bark's not all that distinctive, holds on to its leaves. And you can also see some of these leaves at the base here. So generally there's two kinds of oak, red and white. This is definitely a white, has the lobed leaves. Some of these things have leaves that don't have that big of lobes on them, but if the tips are rounded, they're in the white oak family. If they're pointed, they're in the red oak family. But then you get weird things like chestnut oaks that don't really have your typical form, but you know, they still get classified in one family or the other. Another thing to point out, you can see that tree over there. Actually, just kind of looking at the forest itself. These trees are predominantly younger than I am. Obviously, this guy looks like he's probably a bit older. Some of these other ones, but a lot of times they cut these forests for lumber, and they left certain trees to repopulate the forest. Now this guy right here, you can tell compared to some of these other guys that are tall and straight and not very wide, that's the way they grow when they're growing in forest conditions. You know, they're trying to compete for the light. He's trying to get up above this guy. Now you go back to this big guy over here and how wide he is. He grew when this was either scrubland or a farmer's field, because he's kind of proportionately shorter and wider. Generally, that's how you can kind of tell. And a lot of times in these forests, you'll see all these forest-grown trees, like you see that guy right there. Tall and thin, no branches near the bottom, goes all the way up there, and then he starts branching out. He's been just putting all his energy into going up so he can get up there and get his little chunk of the light. But then you look at some of these, even this tree here that's closer, this guy was definitely taller than everybody around him, and probably didn't start dropping these lower branches until other things started growing close to him and shading out those lower branches. This was at least more open savanna-like at one point in time, because these oak trees definitely didn't grow under forest conditions. Here I am closer to this older tree. He's got to be at least 30 inches diameter breast height here. He's an old timer, but you can see he's got a scar right there. He's had some huge branches comparatively low. So like I said, that means he didn't have to go up to get light. He could just get up above, you know, probably taller grasses or whatever, because, you know, even a meadow can have things 6, 8, 10 feet tall that are just herbaceous plants. But all you had to do is get above those, and then he could just stretch out and suck up all the light that he wanted. And you can see that branch there. It looks like it grew out and then had, as the other trees around it got taller, he sent a sucker shoot straight up. Looks like a tree growing on top of a tree right there. But yeah, you can see there's that dead branch there. Some of these things died as it started to get shadier towards his base, but he's got another pretty good nub right there where there used to be a large branch. So just a little bit of detective work on, you can see more of the branches here. Exactly who grew where and when. It's another neat thing about growing trees from scratch. You see what the hell they look like in 10 or 20 years, and you start realizing that, you know, a lot of these trees, yeah, they're only a couple of decades old. They're not some ancient forest. Another easy to identify winter tree, and the birds sure seem to like it, is the Staghorn sumac. And it's one of the last things with little berries or seeds for the birds to eat, so the birds are having a feast here right now. And contrary to popular belief, they are kind of sort of half-ass related to the poison sumac, but they're not poisonous. You can tell these, I can't really, I'll zoom in, see if that helps. But yeah, they got a little bit of fuzziness to them. Fuzzy means it's staghorn. If I can zoom in on the birds there. It's just looking at me. Tell by the call that at least some of these guys are robins, even though the one that I saw closer up was a catbird. So the robins are back. I don't think they're all robins, but I definitely hear a robin calling in there. Yep, that's robins calling. But that's that. And there they go. You can get a little closer look at the bark on them. The bark's not too impressive. The jaggers are our old friend, the multiflora rose, poking through. Another Oriental Bittersweet climbing up through there. The sumac's got this sort of lenticulated bark here. These guys tend to be hollow inside too. I've heard they're good for making things like Native American style flutes. And you can also use the berries, obviously earlier in the year than this, to make sort of a lemonade type drink. Like I said, they get a bad rap because there is something called a poison sumac, but they're not poisonous. And even the poison sumac, it's not poisonous, it's an allergic reaction just like poison ivy. Yeah. Found one that I could actually pull down and get closer up. You can see the fuzz on it. Fuzz makes it staghorn sumac because it looks like the velvet on a deer's antlers. And these are little berries that the birds are picking apart, because this is the bad time of year for things. The fall fruits are gone and the spring stuff hasn't really come up yet, so late February, early March is probably the famine time most years. It's been a warm winter this year though. Easily identified non-native tree, that's a Norway spruce. You can tell by the way it's kind of got the droopy hanging like Spanish moss style branches when they get big.